Welcome to the Next Level Law Podcast, where we explore innovative strategies to grow and scale your law firm in today's competitive legal landscape. Joining you each week are veterans in the legal space and law firm growth experts Arash Eskandari and Richard Perillo, coming to you with over 18 years of combined experience, successfully transforming legal practices. Our hosts are passionate about helping law firm owners take their business to the next level. If you want to exponentially increase your client base, revenue, efficiency, and profitability, you're in the right place. Stick around as your hosts dive into actionable insights and proven methods tailored specifically to help your law firm ascend to new heights. Time to get down to business.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Next Level Law Podcast. I'm Richard Perillo and I'm joined today by Snehal Massey, owner of SPM Law Offices in Columbia, Maryland. Snehal's firm primarily focuses on family law cases, and we're excited to have her joining us today on the pod. Today's podcast is sponsored by Vertical 10. Vertical 10 provides full-service digital marketing solutions exclusively for law firms coast to coast. Vertical 10 specializes in SEO, Facebook, and Google direct marketing. Visit vertical10.com for more information on how to scale your firm and gain new clients today. Thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate you on the podcast this morning.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's really, I'm really excited and honored to be here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we were talking a little bit before we went live, your firm is handling primarily family law cases out of Columbia, Maryland.
Correct. So my office is in Columbia, Maryland, and we exclusively practice family law. So divorce, custody, we do some uncontested adoption, but pretty much that is the extent of our practice. And we actually practice in all of the major jurisdictions in Maryland. So whether it's Baltimore County, Montgomery County, Baltimore City, and Arundel, Howard, all the big jurisdictions, we will go there.
Okay, perfect. How long has your firm been in service to the community?
So I officially started the firm end of 2021, but I think January 2022 is probably when I put my full foot forward. So it's been about coming up on 3 years now.
Okay. So, and before you opened your own firm, can you talk a little bit about your history coming up in the legal professions through the ranks, and what really motivated you to branch out on your own? Because, starting any business is terrifying or scary, especially in today's economy. But if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, some of the motivations and, really what drove you to open your own firm.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my legal career was a little non-traditional. I didn't go to law school right after undergrad. I actually was in a business major, worked in marketing for about 6 to 7 years. And to height of my marketing career, I decided to pivot completely and go to law school. It was something I always wanted to do, but I couldn't figure out why I wanted to go to law school before. And so I just did what I was doing in marketing, and I loved it. But I kept being called, I was volunteering a lot with other nonprofits, and all of them were surrounding children, family, and things like that. So I think that's when it hit me that I probably could make a bigger impact by getting a legal degree and helping families. So I went to law school 7 years out of undergrad with the sole purpose of practicing family law. So when I went to law school, I kind of targeted everything towards getting the family law classes under my belt and experience. After law school, I clerked for a circuit court judge in Anne Arundel County, which I thought was one of the best jobs I've had, because I was able to just sit there and watch other really good attorneys litigate and kind of learn from them. And also being able to have that relationship with a judge is, I think, invaluable. And then I practiced at two prominent Baltimore City and Baltimore County firms doing family law. That's where I learned how to litigate. I worked with really good attorneys that were great mentors that kind of taught me everything I know now. And I never anticipated opening my own practice. It was something that I was a little forced to do. I had some medical issues in 2021, and I had to take a break from working completely. So when I decided to take a break from working, my husband and I decided, well, why don't I start my own practice? That way I can kind of dictate my schedule, my calendar. And that's kind of when I started the firm. And since then, it's kind of grown, not by anything I'm purposefully doing, but I think it's just kind of grown by the fact that I've been practicing for a while, and I truly do love what I do.
And that's kind of the theme that we've, since we've started the podcast this year. That's kind of the theme of what we've seen from some really, really the most successful attorneys, whether it's family, criminal, PI, the ones who are really the most successful, don't look at it as a job. They do love what they do. And it's certainly, made a difference in, how they help their clients and, and just their overall outlook. You said you have a marketing business background. So kind of talking about client acquisition, again, with it being, relatively speaking, a newer firm, not, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, established. When you first opened, were you primarily word of mouth? Were you doing any type of radio or digital or print marketing? How were you acquiring those new clients coming out of 21?
Just word of mouth. And I think even primarily now, I would get 80% of my clients or referrals from my past clients and referrals from attorneys that I have relationships with. And it seems to be, or just other referral partners that I've networked with and made relationships. Now I do market on social media. We do have some print marketing, but by far most of my clients, and I also find that the best clients I get are from the referrals, because it's someone that either worked with me or knows me that referred me, and it's a better lead in some ways when I get them than someone that's just Googling or cold calling.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we also see that as well, because there's some personal relationship, already coming into the situation. So now, you're a solo firm, or do you have associates or partners?
So I am solo in the sense that I'm the only attorney in my office. I have support staff. I have 4 other folks in my office. I have 2 paralegals, a firm administrator, and a law clerk that work for me. So, but I'm the only attorney at this time.
Gotcha. Now, is there ever any plans to scale, or are you comfortable with it being your solo firm, solo attorney firm?
So I didn't have plans to scale, but I'm finding that because I'm growing, and I was just talking to my admin right now, and we've just been really busy, and I'm only one person. So I don't know if I can provide the level of service that I would want to for my clients without having someone else. So I think I'm thinking about the next few hires are going to probably be an associate, but that's just such a big commitment that I want to make sure I can not just be able to financially afford them, but also be able to put in the effort to be able to mentor and have the right person for the job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we see that, we see that as a very, very, common challenge when firms are looking to expand. And it's nice to hear that, you're actively willing to take on that mentor piece, because a lot of our audience is individuals who are in law school or just coming out of law school. Can you talk a little bit about, when you first came out of law school and you first started practicing, what were some of the challenges? What were some of the, some of the hurdles that you had to face, you had to overcome? I know you said you were able to clerk, in an outstanding situation. But can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges, like when you first came out, and some of the strategies or the methods that you used to overcome those challenges? Because nobody has a perfect smooth road.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I think one of the biggest things, and I don't know if it was an advantage that I had, is when I was in law school with my marketing background, I always knew, as an attorney, every attorney, I believe, is their own brand. So that was always something in the back of my head as I was even in law school. And I knew that networking was probably the best way to be able to move around in the legal field, or any field, really, honestly. So even in law school, I put a lot of emphasis on networking and reaching out to, I was that law student that was literally cold emailing attorneys saying, hey, can I take you to coffee and pick your brain? And so that's what I was doing from the beginning. And that really helped me learn more about the legal industry, because I'm the only person in my family that went to law school. I don't have any other lawyers that I even know. So I didn't, other than what was on TV, I didn't really know what lawyers do other than help people. So I think having those meetings really helped me see different perspectives, different types of law and attorneys. And that started my network of folks. And what I learned in that time was your network is invaluable, because I can tell you, Rich, every single job I've gotten, it wasn't the traditional I applied and interviewed. It was because, hey, this person, I know Snehal, and this person's looking for someone. Why don't you interview? And they put my name in the hat. And that's how I got every single job that I've gotten, which I think is likely how we're transitioning in the world. I don't think the traditional application method is the same way as it used to be 10, 20 years ago. So I do believe network is invaluable, especially in this profession, and your reputation is everything. I remember in law school, and everyone remembers this probably, that the first week of law school, they always say, look at the person next to you, the left of you, right of you. Those are the most important people that you're going to know. And I do believe that's true, because your reputation will precede you before you walk into a room. So that was always a big thing. So I think building my network was really invaluable, and I learned from everyone. I think that's the other thing I try to take in. Even an attorney that was probably not making the most persuasive argument, I learned from them, because I'm like, oh, that's something I can do better or something. So I think I was always in that aspect of, what can I learn from someone? What can I take away? And how can I be of value to someone else? Some of the challenges, I think, is law school doesn't prepare you to be in the courtroom as much as you would expect you to be. I think the biggest challenges is when you start working in a firm. In law school, you learn all the theoretical stuff, but drafting those pleadings and talking to clients, all of those things are things that you don't really learn in law school, and you have to teach yourself, or you have to have people that are willing to teach you. And I was very fortunate to have those mentors. And I think having mentors or people in your corner is really helpful, even if it's not in the place you're working. Even out, I always encourage law students to have people outside of where they're working, so that you can always bounce ideas off of someone else and get a different perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and then, with you talking before about paying it forward, yeah, definitely, an opportunity to, to take what you learned and then help, potential associates or other attorneys, which is really nice. Can you talk a little bit about why family law? Like why you jumped into family law? I mean, it's, it can be highly emotional, volatile. I mean, we're dealing with, some of the biggest events in people's lives. Typically, well, the divorces, sometimes they can be a relief, but obviously, not always. So, that it takes a special kind of a person, a special kind of attorney to really, go through that every day, go through that emotion every day, I mean, because you bleed with your clients, right? I mean, you're not a robot. So if you could talk a little bit about, why family law?
Yeah, and it's the typical cliche answer. Unfortunately, I really did want to help people, and I wanted to help children specifically, because, like you said, family law is when someone's going through one of the worst times in their lives. It's this transition that's happening. That's such a major transition, and while the parents or the adults are the ones making the decisions, it stems down to the kids that are involved. And I wanted to be able to help those families during that transition, make it a little easier while they go through this. And it's interesting because while my clients are the parents, and that is who I advocate for and represent, I do take a very child-centric approach. And I always ask my clients, I understand this is what you want, but how does this affect your children? And is this the best for the children? And I know that's not typically what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to advocate for your clients, whatever they want, within reason, obviously. But I do believe that if you're looking at the family as a whole, that you're going to be able to get them a result that's more sustainable long term. And a lot of times my clients don't like it in the beginning, but I think as they continue to work with me, they see the benefit of it and how they can actually make this work long term. Because like you said, it is such a big transition and you don't know what you're going to be doing next other than going through this time. The other thing I've learned is, and I learned this through practicing family law, is the biggest thing that you can give your clients is being empathetic to them, because a lot of times you have so many different people or Google telling you what you should or shouldn't do. I think just listening to them and being empathetic is invaluable, because sometimes they just need to be able to process it by talking it out or whatever it is. And the other thing I always tell them, I always tell all my clients, make sure you get a therapist. Whether you believe it or not, you're going to need it during this time, because there's just so many emotions. And like you said, I'm in there the trenches with them, but I tell them I'm not going to get emotional because you're not paying me to get emotional with you. Because if I'm emotional too, then I'm not being objective and advocating for you, right? So, and I also tell them I'm a very expensive therapist and I'm not going to be able to actually help you when you unload emotionally on me. So please pay a therapist, because they can actually give you the tools necessary. A lot of them take me up on it. Some of them don't. And then they realize when they get their bill and I'm like, but you charged me for that entire hour I vented to you and you didn't do anything about it. I'm like, you're right, because there was nothing to do. I just listened. And that's why you should get a therapist. And they often end up getting a therapist after. But I do think equipping the families with those tools to help them go through this process in a safe and sustainable way is what I try to do.
Absolutely. What would you say, kind of looking back on your career, whether, as the owner of your firm or when you were working at other firms, do you have a particular case or situation that was just, incredibly challenging and you had to kind of think outside the box to get a resolution? Is that something you could expand on a little bit?
Yeah, I would say the most, I don't know if it's the most challenging, but I think it was the most involved case that I've had. My client, he came to me, he was a federal agent, and it started off as a domestic violence situation, and obviously that impacted his career in many ways as well. So the parties agreed to start the divorce process and kind of let go of the domestic violence part of it. However, in the middle of it, my client was the father or the husband in the situation. He was not. He was being deprived time from his 3 children for no other reason than just, I guess, because mom didn't want to at that point. So we had to fight for custody. We ended up having, I want to say, 3 hearings before we could even go to the divorce trial. But while we were doing that, and every time we went to court, I was able to get my client time with his kids and just the things that he was being denied unjustly. While we were doing that, mom decided to go and file criminal charges in the middle of all of that too. And while it probably didn't have a lot of merit, it was going to impact his career substantially. So he had to take it very, very seriously. And while we were having the divorce case proceeding, he had to have a whole criminal trial. Ended up being a 2-day criminal trial. I had a very good friend and colleague of mine represent him, and they had to do a whole criminal trial. He was ultimately acquitted of it, but this family had to go through all of that while separating and trying to take care of their kids during this transition. So it left a really big impact on me, because I can see how small things can spiral and make things so much bigger. And not just that they had to go through this, but financially, they had to go through multiple attorneys. And then I think he was also, because as a federal agent, he was being investigated internally for that too. So it impacted him quite a bit. But I will say, after all of this was said and done, my client very recently called me with some really good news, and we're still waiting for his divorce. So I was just like, what do you mean good news? I don't know anything about it. I thought the court ruled on something that I didn't know, right? And he said, Snehal, I'm going to law school. And I was like, what? He said, what you did for me and my family and how you got my kids back for me inspired me to go to law school and help other people do the same thing. So now he's going to law school in the fall, which was incredibly surprising. And it was such an honor to hear that, because to see that that's the impact that I made on his family when I was just doing my job and helping them, I think it really showed me why I do what I do. And it was like, okay, this is why I'm doing all of this. Because sometimes it is hard when you're going through this with your clients, because it's unfair. Sometimes there's only certain things you can do legally. And I feel like my hands are tied and I can't really help them as I want to. So to see the impact that you actually have, I think was really helpful for me to keep going and doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, hearing that, and, again, we, like I said, Vertical 10, we work with lawyers across the spectrum. So, we hear, cases that, very similar to what what you just described, where, multiple situations, whether it's true, half true, not true, whatever it ends up being. And everybody has the right to due process and their day.
Right.
One thing that really keeps coming up on the podcast, and I'm glad that you told that story on a personal level, because it kind of goes into my next question. Being a business owner, being a law firm owner, can you talk a little bit about the work-life balance and how you maintain your just talking with you today, and the very positive outlook that you have, the positive approach that you have. Talk a little, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about how you maintain, the work-life balance, and how, you're running your business, you're managing your firm. So, and you've got your employees that you're managing, you're in court, you're dealing with judges, other counsel. So how are you, what strategies are you using to maintain that positive work-life balance, and that, and that positive, just, general attitude you can see, we've been talking for 25 minutes. You can just see it coming through, very clear.
So I think that's a really hard question, in the sense of balance is something that I continually try to attain, but I don't think I can. I think as attorneys or just professionals, work-life balance, I feel like, is a myth for me. And I think I recently realized that my life is not balanced in any way, in the sense of traditionally, like I go to work 9 to 5, and then I go home and pick up my kid, and I spend, 2 hours before she goes to bed. That's not my life at all. My life, just every single day, every single week, is very, very different. And I think one thing that I have learned and I've come to terms with is that my life is not balanced, and that's okay. And by what I mean by that is, one week I am at work all week long, sometimes till 10 o'clock, like this week. But then the next week, after my trials are over, whatever, I get to take time off because I earned it, and I am my own boss, and I can block that time off on my calendar. And so I have been able to accept that my life is balanced in different ways, that there's going to be very heavy times and then some low times, and I just have to take them as they come. And so some of the strategies that I have learned and am really trying to implement is making sure to calendar and block off time for myself. Self-care, I think, we talk about it so much, but we don't do it as professionals as much as we should and we ought to. I always say I'm going to take care of myself, but then something else comes up and my staff's like, you don't have any time on your schedule, Snehal. Can I squeeze them in where you have a private appointment? And those private appointments are usually like my Pilates class or something. And I'm like, okay, fine, that's fine. If I don't have any time, I'll skip my Pilates and we can meet with a client. And I tend to do that a lot. And then I realize, or my husband reminds me, he's like, have you not been to Pilates? And I'm like, why? Am I being really cranky? And he's like, well, I don't want to say that. But I realize that it affects me in other ways and other people, and I'm not at my best. So if by me sacrificing, quote unquote, my Pilates class because I'm trying to help my clients, I'm not really doing a service to them, because I'm not at my best, because I'm taking on too much and I don't have a way to relieve some of that stress. So I really try to make sure now there are some non-negotiables on my calendar, and my staff knows, unless it's like the court saying you have to be here, that is a time you're not even going to ask me to maybe skip that time. So I think self-care is super important. And then, like I said earlier, just when you have those really busy seasons, make sure you to schedule some off time for yourself, because you need it. You need that time to recharge so that you can be the best for yourself, your clients, or your family. Because at the end of the day, even though I love helping my clients and their families, I also have to make sure I'm there for my family. My daughter this week, because I'm prepping for trial, I have 2 trials next week. So So I've been prepping for that. My daughter mentioned to me on Wednesday, she said, Mommy, I haven't seen you all week. And she hasn't because I've been at work all week, late into the night before she went to bed. And so yesterday I decided to leave at 4 o'clock, even though I had other things to do, so I can pick her up from school. Usually her dad does, but I picked her up from school and she was so excited that we got to spend an hour or two together, not doing much, but she was just content with that. So I think being able to do those things helps me remember and also feel good about what I'm doing for the families that I try to help.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that's what we keep hearing, from all different types of attorneys is if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else is going to. And that's, and that's something for, I mean, that could be any business. You're running a landscaping business, a contracting business. It doesn't matter. It could be any type of business. So, to hear that's nice. And it's, kids are out for the summer, so they'll be very demanding with time. So that's, that's going to be, another challenge in itself, with the next couple of months, But, one thing I also wanted to kind of circle back onto, talking with children is, your firm handles child custody cases. Can you kind of expand a little bit on, and I know each case is unique and each situation is, but can you talk a little bit about your approach to, how you handle those custody cases? You were also saying adoption as well. So can you talk a little bit about your approach on handling that? And I know, you said before, you're looking out for the best interest of the child, even sometimes above the client, which is really refreshing to hear because, you're very frank about that. And and it's something that, probably needs to be, said more often, but, you don't mind talking a little bit about, how you kind of approach those cases and how you deal with that type of situation.
Yeah. So unfortunately or fortunately, I guess, custody is probably the biggest part of my practice, child custody cases, whether it's in divorce or just by themselves. So while I don't always meet the actual children in the case because I am representing the clients, the parties more, the parents more, like I said earlier, I do try to take a very child-centric approach and I try to get to know the children. And I tell my clients, you know your kids best. However, when you go to court, I always give them, I think I'm more candid with my clients than they expect me to be. And sometimes they don't like what I have to tell them, but I tell them, listen, you'd rather hear from me than a judge when you're in court, right? At least I'm going to prepare you. I tell them, and I'm very realistic, and I say, when you go to court, the court really doesn't care what you want. And I'm not meaning it in a bad way, but they're going to look at it from your kid's perspective, no matter what. And that's all the court is going to care about. So I try to prepare my clients more for that realistic view versus what they probably think. A lot of times within these custody cases, there's a lot of heightened emotions and people are going based off, but the other parent did this to me. And I always ask them, but are they a good parent? I know they may not have been a good spouse or partner, but are they a good parent? And oftentimes it's yes. Very rarely is the other person really a terrible parent. And I have to ask my clients to separate those two. Separate your personal relationship with the other co-parent and look at them as what their relationship with your children is like, and then look at it from that perspective. And while that takes a lot of practice and effort, I think most of my clients, I try to educate them and I try to get them there. And I've also learned, Rich, one of the things that every client is then the best fit for me. And I'm okay with telling them that. And I unfortunately have to tell clients, look, I'm not the best attorney for you. And I do believe that you should find the right fit for you because every client may not like your approach. Some clients just don't like how candid I am and they just want me to do what they say. And while I will always advocate for them, I may not do it if it's unreasonable. And I'll just say, there's other attorneys, you can go to them. And I have no problem saying that. So I think just finding those, learning those things and having those boundaries, I think is really important in making sure you are your best and you also don't burn out in this practice because it is a very emotional practice. Even though I try to separate and put those boundaries, it's hard not to get emotionally involved with my clients'
Right.
cases.
And and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to still ask it anyways. When folks are going through a divorce, it's I would imagine. I mean, I don't know if we could put a number on it, but unless it's uncontested divorce, no kids, but like let's say there's children involved, I would imagine more than half the time it can get nasty might be the best word to describe it.
Yeah.
Right? Do the parents understand what the consequences are for the kids, whether it's one kid, two kids, seven kids? Do they come in? Do they have that understanding, or is that something that you kind of have to educate them on? And you're like, I'm not saying stay together, I'm not saying get divorced, but what you guys are doing, and again, you're very frank and you're very open and honest. So I'm sure, I'm sure you've had some similar conversations, but what you're doing, the negative impact that you're having on these children, maybe it's not your place to say, maybe it is your place to say, just depending on the client. But do most of these individuals who come to you do they understand, the consequences that are going to be happening down the road with the children, whether they, end up getting divorced or staying together? Are they capable of looking at that, or they can't see, they can't see the forest through the trees for the most part?
I think the majority is what you said, they can't see the forest through the trees, because I think at the time they come to me, they're so entrenched in their emotions and they probably haven't processed any of this. I think a lot of them are saying, but I know this is what is good for my kids, but they're not really looking at it logically, versus they're looking at it through the lens of their emotions and not stepping back. So a lot of my job is to sit there and counsel them and educate them and say, I understand, and also validate their feelings, right? Because what they're feeling is true and it's right. And I don't want to minimize what they're going through, but they do need to take a step back as parents and say, okay, this is my emotion. Am I projecting it on my children's relationship, and how will it impact them? And I don't know if every attorney does that, but I know I try to do that a lot. We do spend a lot more time, I think, on education in terms of, and not in a preachy way, but just as we represent them in just conversations, so they know, or at least have that awareness that their actions are having consequences or could have future consequences with their children's relationship with themselves or the other parent. And my hope is that my clients, and this doesn't always happen, they see it by the time the end of the case. Sometimes I can't get through to them, but oftentimes I think I do succeed in at least giving them that awareness, whether they make those changes or not. At least they're more aware of their actions than they were when they first came to me.
And I suppose that at the end of the day, that's all you can really do, because I mean, people are going to make their decisions. By the time they get to you, is there any situations where they decide not to go through with the divorce, or once they've retained your firm, like this is it, they're going, it's 100%?
I would probably, ideally, I would say they would go through it. I can count at least two cases off the top of my head that I can think of clearly. One case where we literally had the entire divorce. It was very contentious. And then 6 months after, for some reason, my client reached out to me and the parties were still together. They were still living together. They were traveling together. I said, are you guys back together? They didn't want to admit it, but I think they were back together after they got the divorce. And there was another case where it was a collaborative divorce that we did. We went through multiple meetings, the parties even separated, got two households. We were done with negotiating the agreement. All they had to do was put their John Hancock on them. And my client called me and said, we got back together. I moved back into the house. And I was like, after this whole year and you guys got two households? So it does happen, but more often than not, by the time they do come to me, they're usually ready to separate, or at least one party is. And I always tell people, even if you're not sure you want to separate, go meet with an attorney. So at least you can understand what the process is, what your rights are, because oftentimes in a separation, it's not always that both people are on the same page and want to separate. It's one person that wants it. The other person was probably surprised by it. So I always tell people, go and meet with an attorney, even if you don't know you want the divorce or you're not planning to. At least that way you are informed, educated, and when your spouse or partner comes to you, you can say, okay, what they're saying is right, wrong, or I know better, so that you can make the right decision for you and your family.
and we're almost out of time here, and again, definitely appreciate how generous you've been with your time and open and honest with this conversation. Just a couple more just quick questions before we wrap this up. Ideally, next 5 or 10 years, where do you see your practice going? Where do you see the firm at? And can you talk a little bit about some of the goals you had? I know we talked a little bit about potentially adding an associate under the ideal circumstances, but where do you see things going next 5-10 years? Which may be impossible to look, because I personally can't look past July 1st. So maybe that's a an impossible platitude, but next few years, where do you see your firm going, and where do you see it in terms of with where you guys are focused?
Yeah, so I unfortunately I am a planner, so I do plan for the next 5 years. They don't always go according to my plan, but I do want to grow. We have been scaling. Like I said, I've started it almost 2.5 years ago, and we have 4 people on my staff, which I didn't expect at all. So I do want to get another attorney. One thing I want to find is someone to manage my firm. I've learned, as much as I love having my firm, I love being an attorney more, and managing the firm is a full-time job as well. And to be able to do that well, I want to be able to have someone on the business side of it to run the business as the business. And so I can be the lawyer and hire more lawyers and do that. The other thing I really want to do, I don't have any huge, like, this is what I want to make and this is how many attorneys I want to have. I want to be a little more hands-off in terms of, I want to have more time to myself and my family. I have an 8-year-old. One of the reasons we started the firm was so that I can spend a little bit more time with her. And I don't think I am as much right now. So I want to be able to spend more time with my family as well, but I still want to continue to grow my practice. So that means that I probably will have to add more attorneys. So that's what I'm hoping to do in the next few years.
Yeah, and it's a balancing act, and now do you or any of your staff take advantage of like working from home, because a lot of it can be done over Zoom, or is it just primarily just all out of the office based?
So we do have an office space. Everyone's in the office, except we do have work from home as well. Each staff gets to work from home 1 day a week. And they rotate kind of in terms of, so we always have people in the office. We are pretty liberal with our work from home. So if you have a doctor's appointment, you can work from home on that day. It doesn't have to be a work from home day. I do believe, and one of the biggest things when I started my firm is that we are whole people, and you can bring your whole self to work. So that doesn't mean your personal life. You don't need to leave that in a box in your car when you walk into the workplace, in the office. So if you have a bad day, I always tell my staff, you need to take a mental health day, take a mental health day. You have stuff going on in your life. You don't have to tell me what it is, and you can just call me and say, Snehal, I need this day off. No questions asked. You can take that time off. I do believe that the better you treat your people, the better harder they're gonna work for you and your clients. So I do try to strive to do that. So we have a pretty liberal policy on that. And I try to make sure that we all fit into the culture. We're pretty laid back here, and we make sure that everyone is a good fit, and that we get along really well. And I think so far we've done a good job with that.
Yeah, and a couple of questions I do want to wrap up, and we ask a lot of the attorneys, if you could tell the younger Snehal, some of the the lessons that you've learned, and again, this is also helpful for like we talked about, some of the the individuals who are in law school listening to this, or or even on their own as starting their own business. What would be some advice you would give to yourself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that you wish somebody had told you?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I would say trust yourself. A lot of times I think, and I don't know if it's because of the way I was raised, a lot of times I doubt myself more than I probably should. So trust yourself, you know yourself best. Make sure you establish good practices for yourself, such as the self-care routine, and surround yourself with different types of people. Because one of the biggest things I think, especially as a business owner, that I have learned is I feel like sometimes I'm on an island by myself, but I'm not. So I have a great group of friends that I can call to just talk through some management issues and things like that. So as long as you have that network and build that network, it's invaluable. So I think it's never too early to start that. And I would encourage all law students to start doing that in law school so that it is a practice. It's just a habit that a practice that they make a habit going forward.
Gotcha. And just to kind of wrap it up, and you know, like you said, you do some therapy, so we're getting free therapy today. But what would be the best advice you could give to individuals who are, they're not right there at the divorce, they're not ready for, to meet with you, but like, from your vast experience, what kind of advice would you give to individuals, married couples, who are having issues, and they may not be at the point where, they're sitting across from you in the office, but they might be 6 months away, they might be 3 months away, they might be 6 days away. If we could kind of wrap it up, maybe just based off your experience, what's a little bit of guidance you could give to our audience to, maybe help, clarify their path, or just give them some guidance.
Yeah, I would say, I think the biggest thing I'd say, even if you think you're not ready to meet with an attorney, go meet with an attorney, because just because you meet with an attorney doesn't mean you have to retain them. I have people that meet with me and a year and a half later, they decide they're ready for it, or they decide after they meet with me, no, I'm going to stick this out and make my marriage work, whether it's counseling or whatever. So meet with an attorney so they can help you figure out a plan, whether it's to move forward with the divorce or not move forward with the divorce. Today, I just met with a young lady. She was like, oh, you gave me the language to talk to my spouse next. So I think meeting with a good attorney and having that meeting and getting informed about your rights and the process is invaluable. And it does make a difference in determining your next step, even though it probably sounds counterintuitive to go see a divorce attorney.
Right. And I got one more question because it just popped in my head.
Sure.
Your firm handles prenups, correct?
We do. Those are my favorite, actually.
Okay. Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of attorneys, they say it's not easy, of course, but it's very direct, and it's very, and my wife and I always joke around because we met when we were in our early 20s, and our kids asked, do you guys have a prenup? And we were like, when we met, neither one of us had a dollar. So there was nothing to worry about. So yeah, it's, my wife gets a good laugh out of that when my kids ask, oh, you guys have a prenup? No.
Well, it's not too late for a postnup, Rich.
No.
Got a postnup.
No. So I've already thrown my lot in. So, I got
I understand.
I got 3 pairs of shoes. So, one of them's Crocs, but have you seen, and this is a little bit off topic, have you seen prenups be, I guess, taken the wrong way? Because again, I don't come from that world. I bartended my way through college. My wife, was, worked her way through. So like, when we met at 22 or 23, I think we had like $800 combined, so there wasn't anything to
yeah.
But when you see, an individual, with, a substantial net worth, what type of issues do you see, on the prenup side? And again, I kind of snuck this in at the last minute, but I
No worries.
definitely wanted to, kind of get your take on that.
So I think by the time people are coming to me for a prenup, the other party is aware, because like you said, they probably have some considerable assets, though. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. What I do see happen is that while both parties are on the same page about getting the prenup, and I often people come to me, oh, it's not going to be hard. We've already agreed on everything. And they come to me, and I can't represent both parties. So the other partner has to have their own attorney. And again, my job is to look in for the best interest of the person I'm representing. And sometimes what the parties have agreed to may not be in my client's best interest, and I have to educate them. And so now they have to go back to their partner and say, well, maybe we need to rethink this. And so it does maybe cause a little bit of friction, but I always tell them that by you going through the process right now, you're making it so much easier if, and hopefully only if, you guys end up getting divorced. You're not going through that battle at that point when your emotions are way more heightened. Right now, they're a little bit more logical and they're not as emotional and they're happy to be getting married and they're in that phase. So I do think that it's a little easier, but I have had prenups take way longer because parties don't think about all of the different nuances when they're deciding with their partner that, oh yeah, we are going to split everything down the middle. And ideally that's great. But our job as attorneys is to educate them on, if they did this, this is the consequence. And so do we want to do it this way or provide some alternatives? And while it causes friction, I always try to tell them this, you're making it pain-free when or if you guys decide to separate. And this also, I think prenups get a bad rap because they are like, why are you planning for a marriage to fail? I look at it as you're actually putting this together to say, we're never going to use this. So we're going to make every effort to make this marriage work and that we never have to actually enforce this agreement. So sometimes that can also encourage parties to make it work because now otherwise they're going to have to split things the way they agreed to 15, 25 years ago.
And have you seen situations where, one individual came into the situation, with a large net worth, there's no prenup, and then it gets incredibly contentious and, and again, definitely appreciate your time, but, just
Right.
interesting topic that I think our audience, is interested in. You see a situation where, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, individual came into it, larger net worth than the other one. Maybe they built success together. Maybe, maybe one was a homemaker, maybe, either male or female, doesn't really matter. Or maybe it does, but, have you seen where it's, there hasn't been a prenup and then you've really seen it where it could have been a relatively clean, and I know that's a difficult term to use in the family law world, but a relatively clean situation become just an absolute disaster?
I think that's 90% of what we do, unfortunately, is because there are no prenups. Now we're hiring experts and multiple attorneys, and you're litigating for 4 years because there's so many assets that you have to get valued and things like that. So I think prenups, to me, like I said earlier, are my favorite. And I jokingly tell my husband when we go to weddings, I'm like, oh, I should give him my card to get a post-up or something like that. And I don't mean it in a bad way because I know, like you said, they have a bad rap, but I do believe that they actually are helpful to a marriage because you're saving thousands and tens of thousands of dollars by getting a prenup in the beginning, because if it doesn't work out, then you're in for a very, very wild ride.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this up. Snehal, if you don't mind, telling everyone where they can find you, the best way to contact you as we finish up this episode. You've been incredibly generous with your time, incredibly honest and frank, and I definitely appreciate it. I know our audience will appreciate it. But if you don't mind, just telling everybody how they can find you, how they can contact you. I know you're based out of Columbia, Maryland, and you handle that area pretty much exclusively. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up. And how can we find you? How can they?
Sure.
On your phone.
So Rich, I'm going to say thank you for you and Araj for inviting me to be on this podcast. I'm really, really honored, and it was great chatting with you. I can't believe it's almost been an hour. It was just a really good conversation. So I appreciate you having me on and having this platform. In order to find me, I am on all the, my website is spmlawoffice.com. You can find me online there. I am also on Facebook, LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's the best way to find me. I've made some incredible connections, and I think actually that's how I met Arash too. So it's been a great medium. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, as well as Facebook. And then if you ever want to reach out to me especially if it's law students, I love talking to law students, or anyone that's wanting to go to law school or deciding whether this is the right fit, please email me. You can reach me at snehal@spmlawoffice.com.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that wraps up another issue of the Next Level Law podcast. Thank you again for joining us. And we would love to be able to circle back, check in with you down the road, see how the scaling has gone and how your firm has been expanding, continuing to help people. So we'd love to have you hop on as a guest again, in the down the road next few months, if that works out for you.
That would be great. I would love to.
All right. Thank you very much. Perfect.
Thank you, Rich. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Next Level Law Podcast with your hosts, Arash Eskandari and Richard Perillo. We hope you discovered some game-changing takeaways to implement immediately for leveraging your law firm growth. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review and rating on your preferred platform to help get the word out. You can also visit vertical10.com to access free law firm growth resources and a free copy of Arash's book, The Law Firm Marketing Blueprint. Finally, remember to join Arash and Richard next time as they continue revealing their best strategies for taking your firm to the next level. Until then, here's to your success.